January 1st, 1945, 11:12 a.m., St. Trond Airfield, Belgium. Smoke drifts across the ruined airfield like a funeral shroud. Wrecked FW-190s burn at the edges of the runway, their ammunition cooking off in sharp, crackling pops. Mechanics from the 48th Fighter Group move cautiously among the debris, extinguishing fires and dragging bodies from crashed aircraft. The New Year's morning attack is over. The last German fighter has either been shot down, crashed, or fled. American pilots stand beside their Mustangs and Thunderbolts, faces smeared with oil and sweat, staring at the devastation with a strange mixture of anger and disbelief. Major John Duncan, a Mustang squadron leader, shakes his head slowly as he inspects the wreckage. "They threw everything they had at us," he mutters. Everything. And still it wasn't enough. The Luftwaffe attempts to regroup. Dozens of miles east at a makeshift forward base near Bonn, the remnants of multiple Luftwaffe Gruppen limp home. Some land with bullet-riddled fuselages. Some skid on collapsed landing gear. Many simply don't return. Ground crews stand waiting, but there are fewer aircraft than expected, many fewer. They look down the runway, hoping to see familiar shapes emerging from the fog. They don't. A mechanic wipes a trembling hand across his mouth. "Where are they? Where's the rest of the formation?" A flight leader climbs out of his FW-190, face gray with shock. "They're gone," he says. "All gone. The Americans were already in the air." A murmur of despair passes through the line. One mechanic slams his fist into the fuselage of a fuel truck. This was supposed to be a surprise attack, but the truth is far more complicated. The terrible accounting. By noon, after partial reports come in from scattered airfields, the scale of the disaster becomes undeniable. Nearly 300 German aircraft launched, over 200 are shot down or destroyed on landing. Many pilots, irreplaceable veterans, are dead or captured. It is, in effect, the largest single-day loss in Luftwaffe history. The reports pile up on the desk of Luftwaffe Command. A colonel reads through them, lips pressed into a thin line. "We have no reserves." Another officer whispers, "We have no pilots." The Luftwaffe had hoped Bodenplatte would cripple Allied air power long enough for German forces in the Ardennes to regain momentum. Instead, the opposite has happened. Germany has burned what remained of its fighter corps for almost no strategic gain. Adler on foot. Meanwhile, deep in the Ardennes forest, Adler trudges through knee-high snow, clutching his bruised ribs. Every breath is a knife in his chest. His uniform is stiff with frozen sweat. The cold gnaws at him, relentless. But he keeps moving. Somewhere behind him, the sound of Allied jeeps grows louder, search parties fanning out from the airfields. If they find him, his survival ends in captivity. He presses deeper into the forest, limping through the shadows of towering pines. He thinks of Wilson, his wingman, his friend, shot down before his eyes. He thinks of the briefing room, the charts, the promises of a decisive blow. He thinks of the moment he saw the American Mustangs lifting off and realized Bodenplatte was doomed the instant it began. "All this for what?" he mutters. The forest gives no answer. Inside the Reich Air Ministry. Back in Berlin, Reichsmarshal Goering listens to the casualty reports in stunned silence. Not anger, not denial, but something much closer to fear. A general clears his throat. "Reichsmarschall, with these losses, we cannot defend the Ruhr. We cannot defend Berlin. We cannot defend anything." The words hang in the large, cold room like a death sentence. Bodenplatte wasn't just a failed attack, it was the Luftwaffe's last breath. A gasp of strength where none remained. The silence that follows is suffocating. The sky without eagles. By afternoon, Allied pilots fly patrols across Belgium and the Netherlands. They expect to find the Luftwaffe regrouping. They expect to be challenged. Instead, the sky is empty. No Bf-109s, no FW-190s, no German counterattack. Just scattered smoke trails fading into winter air. Captain Al Simmons flying a P-47 radios to ground control. "You won't believe this. There's nothing up here." It is the first sign that something irreversible has happened. For the first time in the war, the Luftwaffe cannot fight back. The hunters of Europe's skies, masters of 1940, are gone. The end of an era begins. As the sun sinks behind the Ardennes that evening, Adler collapses beneath a fallen spruce, exhausted, freezing, his strength almost gone. He pulls his scarf tighter, breath trembling. Above him, the last colors of daylight fade. He thinks of the Luftwaffe as it once was, unstoppable, feared, triumphant. Now it is a ghost, broken by fuel shortages, pilot attrition, and this final, desperate gamble that cost everything. He closes his eyes. He has survived the battle, but he knows in his bones that Germany will not survive the war. January 1st, 1945, 15:42 p.m., Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Snow begins to fall again, soft, slow flakes drifting through the pine canopy as Adler forces himself upright. His body aches with every movement. His ribs burn, his legs tremble, but he has no choice. Allied patrols are growing closer. The faint crackle of radios, the crunch of boots on snow, occasional bursts of shouted English moving between the trees. Adler presses a hand against a trunk and pulls himself forward. Each breath forms a pale cloud that blows sideways in the icy wind. Just a little farther, he mutters, though he has no idea where he's going. He only knows what he's running from. The forest of the lost. Every direction looks the same. Dark trunks, white snow, gray sky, silence broken only by distant engines and his own labored breathing. He tries to recall the map, the briefing, the planned flight path, but the concussive shock of his crash has left his memory scattered. A twig snaps somewhere behind him. He freezes. Another sound, not boots this time, but voices. American voices. Adler slips behind a fallen tree, pressing himself into the snow. He holds his breath as two shadowy figures pass between the trees, rifles slung over their shoulders. Their footsteps crunch loudly in the silence. One laughs. Hell of a show this morning, huh? The other snorts. Show? Felt more like a shooting gallery. Their words cut like knives. The patrol continues downhill toward the wreck of Adler's Bf-109. He moves the opposite direction, inching deeper into the forest. He does not know it yet, but he is stumbling straight toward the German front line, what little of it remains. The aftermath at Allied HQ. As Adler slips through the trees, the Allied command centers buzz with furious activity. In a crowded operations tent near Liège, officers crowd around a large map covered with colored pins. Smoke curls from a half-dozen cigarettes, and field telephones ring incessantly. General Elwood Quesada, commander of the Aing Tactical Air Command, slams a folder onto the table. They tried to wipe out our fighter groups in one strike. He points to the casualty list, far shorter than the Luftwaffe would have hoped. They failed worse, they crippled themselves. A colonel taps a pencil on the map. Sir, our pilots reported Germans shooting down their own aircraft. Friendly fire. Quesada shakes his head. Desperate pilots, bad coordination, no radios, the Luftwaffe's finished. He pauses, staring at the pins representing destroyed German squadrons. They just don't know it yet. The road to the Rhine. The sun dips low, turning the forest gold. Adler stumbles across what looks like an abandoned foxhole. He leans against the rim, catching his breath. His scarf is iced stiff, his fingers numb. The cold gnaws at him relentlessly. But then, a distant rumble. Not American jeeps, not aircraft. Artillery, German artillery. It's faint, but unmistakable. Adler feels a surge of hope, a flicker of life on this doomed day. He limps toward the sound. The trees begin to thin, the snow grows deeper. And finally, he sees movement through the branches. A column of German grenadiers trudging single file through the snow, helmets dusted white, rifles slung low. Adler raises a weak arm. Kameraden, he croaks. A young soldier spins, aiming his rifle, then lowers it in shock. My God, he's a pilot! Two grenadiers rush forward, grabbing Adler under the arms as he collapses into the snow. Easy, easy, we've got you. Adler tries to speak, but exhaustion steals his words. His vision swims. He feels himself being lifted, carried. A voice beside him says quietly, "You're safe now. We'll get you back." But the truth hangs heavy in the cold air. Back to what? The Luftwaffe is broken. Germany is collapsing. And Operation Bodenplatte has only hastened the end. The general faces the truth. Less than 10 miles away, General Lieutenant Karl Kohler, chief of the Luftwaffe General Staff, stares at casualty reports piled on his desk. Squadron after squadron destroyed. Leaders, aircraft gone forever. He runs a shaking hand down his face. So this is what we've become. An aide approaches hesitantly. Herr General, shall we prepare another mass sortie, perhaps? Kohler slams his fist onto the table. There is no one left to fly. The room goes silent. He sinks into his chair. Bodenplatte was meant to be our resurrection. Instead, it is our execution. He stares at the flickering lamp, at the map showing Allied units advancing from every direction, and he whispers, "The war is lost." Adler awakens to a broken future. Night falls hard over the Ardennes. Adler awakens in a field medical tent, warm blankets, lantern light, the distant boom of artillery echoing like distant thunder. A medic checks his pulse. You're lucky to be alive, Herr Leutnant. Adler gazes at the canvas above him. Images flash. Wilson's burning aircraft, Mustangs rising into the sky, scores of German fighters falling like meteors, the forest swallowing him whole. He closes his eyes. He thinks of the Luftwaffe he joined, full of confidence, skill, pride, and the one he fights for now, desperate, shattered, suffocating under the weight of impossible odds. He whispers, "What have we done?" No one answers. Outside the tent, the snow falls softly over a dying Reich and the few pilots left to witness its end. January 2nd, 1945, 09:14 a.m., Forward Command Post, Hurtgen Sector. Adler sits wrapped in a gray blanket on the back of a truck as it bumps along a snow-covered trail toward a German command post. His body aches. His vision still blurs at the edges from the crash. But he is alive, and for now, among his own. The grenadier sergeant beside him eyes him with a mix of admiration and disbelief. "You're the only pilot we've seen all day," the sergeant says. "Rumor is the whole damn Luftwaffe got wiped out yesterday." Adler does not respond. He simply stares at the passing trees, each one stark and skeletal in the frozen dawn. Every bump sends pain through his ribs, but he doesn't flinch. He already knows the truth. He saw it in the sky, he felt it in his bones as he ran through the forest. But now he is being brought to the men who planned it, the men who promised victory, the men who doomed the Luftwaffe, the command post. The truck stops beside a half-buried bunker, a crude wooden structure reinforced with sandbags and logs. Smoke drifts from a metal stovepipe, the only sign of comfort in the frozen landscape. Inside, officers crowd around a table lit by lanterns. The air smells of wet wool, cold coffee, and cigarette smoke. Adler is ushered in by two grenadiers. A staff officer looks up from a stack of reports, eyebrows raised. "Pilot recovered? Bring him in." Adler steps forward, steady but pale, his uniform torn and stained with dried blood. A tall colonel approaches him, eyes sharp, posture rigid. Name and unit. "Lieutenant Karl-Heinz Adler, JG-4. The colonel nods grimly. "One of ours? Good. We need first-hand reporting." He waves Adler closer to the table. The reality they cannot escape. The table is covered with casualty sheets marked in red pencil. Adler's eyes drift across them. JG-11, JG-2, JG-77, SG-4, unit after unit, line after line of losses. Entire Gruppen marked as destroyed, others labeled combat ineffective. A sickening hollowness fills Adler's chest. The colonel taps one page. "Only 34 aircraft returned from your sector. You understand what that means?" Adler nods slowly. "My Gruppe launched with 97. The colonel doesn't blink. "They are all gone." The bunker is silent. Every officer present knows the significance. These were not just aircraft, they were the last trained pilots, men who could not be replaced. The Luftwaffe has been gutted. A major adjusts his glasses. "You were there, Adler. Tell us what happened." The testimony. Adler takes a long, shaky breath. He sees the morning fog, the unsuspecting airfield, the Mustangs taking off like avenging angels, Wilson's aircraft exploding in flames. He forces the words out. "They were waiting for us." The officers exchange glances. Adler continues, voice tight. "Our formation was scattered in the fog. New pilots were lost before we crossed the lines. By the time we attacked, Mustangs were already airborne." The major frowns. "Impossible. Our intelligence indicated the Allies would be hungover, undermanned." Ooh. Adler shakes his head sharply. "They were ready. It was no surprise. They scrambled within seconds." A heavy silence falls. The colonel whispers, "The operation was compromised." Adler adds quietly, "Or simply doomed from the start." The order no one wants to hear. A door slams open. A runner, boots dripping snow, rushes inside with a coded message. "Urgent report from Luftwaffe West." The colonel snatches the paper, eyes scanning rapidly. His face pales. Headquarters confirms total losses. The bunker seems to shrink. 290 aircraft destroyed, 140 pilots killed or captured, another 70 missing. No one breathes. The lieutenant speaks softly. "Mein Gott, that's half the fighters we had left." The colonel folds the paper slowly. "No, that was the Luftwaffe." He turns to the bunker map where blue and red pins mark Allied ground advances. "We cannot challenge Allied air power again. Not tomorrow, not next week, not ever." The words echo like a funeral bell. Adler faces the truth. The colonel faces Adler. "You survived when almost no one else did." Adler lowers his gaze. He does not feel lucky, he feels hollow. "I saw brave men die for nothing," he says quietly. "We were thrown into the sky like ammunition, not soldiers, ammunition." The colonel exhales slowly. You're dismissed, Lieutenant. Get food, rest. We'll decide where to send you next. Send him where? To what? There is no Luftwaffe left to return to. Adler leaves the bunker and steps into the falling snow. The cold stings his cheeks. He looks up at the gray sky, the same sky once ruled by German eagles. Today it is empty, silent, dead. Just like the Air Force he gave his youth to. January 3rd, 1945, 06:10 a.m., makeshift Luftwaffe barracks, Aachen front. The morning is so cold that Adler's breath hangs like smoke in the dim barracks. A thin blanket does little against the winter air pushing through the cracked wooden walls. The beds around him are half empty. Some of the men never returned yesterday. Others have already been reassigned in desperation. A corporal enters with a clipboard, boots crunching on frozen floorboards. Lieutenant Karl-Heinz Adler? Adler sits up slowly, muscles aching from the crash. Here. The corporal hands him a form stamped Flieger Ersatz, flight replacement. Adler stares at it for a long moment. Replacement for what? There are no fighters left. The corporal leans closer, lowering his voice. Report to Hauptmann Bremer at 0700 hours. He's reorganizing what's left of the Jagdgeschwader. Reorganizing, a polite word for assembling the scraps. A battalion of ghosts. At 0700, Adler arrives at a snow-choked clearing beside 3 battered Opel trucks. A dozen Luftwaffe survivors stand waiting, pilots with bandaged faces, men on crutches, young replacements barely old enough to shave. The air feels heavy, like the start of a funeral. Hauptmann Bremer, a stern, thin officer with dark circles under his eyes, faces them. His voice carries no fire, only exhaustion. Gentlemen, you are what remains. He gestures to a nearby barn. Inside, Adler sees 4 aircraft. A single Bf-109G with its engine cowling removed, a FW-1190A missing half its control panel. 2 abandoned trainers never meant for combat. Bremer continues. Fuel reserves are nearly gone, ammunition is limited, replacements will not be coming. A young pilot coughs in disbelief. Sir, what are we supposed to do with this? Bremer looks at him with deadened eyes. Delay the inevitable. The words fall like stones. Inside Bremer's quarters. Bremer calls Adler inside the barn's tiny side office. A table, a lantern, a map of Belgium riddled with retreat arrows. The captain studies Adler. You survived Bodenplatte. That already sets you apart. Adler shakes his head. I didn't survive because of skill, Herr Hauptmann. I survived because I crashed. Bremer allows the hint of a smile. Even so, we need experience. I'm placing you in charge of training the new pilots. Adler blinks. Training? Training for what? The war will end before these boys can make a proper landing. Herr Hauptmann, they have no future in the air. Bremer's jaw tightens. None of us do, but Berlin insists on maintaining fighter units, on paper. He leans in, voice lowering. Your duty is not to win the war. Your duty is to slow the American advance long enough for civilians to flee. Adler feels something cold settle in his stomach. This is no longer strategy, no longer pride, no longer the Luftwaffe. This is survival, nothing more. Preparing the squadron. The pilots gather around the crippled aircraft. Adler joins them, explaining basic maneuvers, emergency landings, formation flying. Their eyes are wide, uncertain, afraid. A teenage pilot named Voss raises a trembling hand. Lieutenant, what do we do if we encounter Mustangs? Adler's voice catches before he can answer. He thinks of Bodenplatte. He thinks of Wilson's Mustang diving out of the clouds. He thinks of the tracer fire ripping through German wings. Finally, he replies, you don't engage, you evade, you run. The young men exchange glances. This is not what they imagined flying for the fatherland would be like. The message from high command. A runner arrives, salutes briskly, and hands Bremer a sealed envelope. Bremer opens it, brows furrowing deeper with each line. Then he reads aloud. All remaining Luftwaffe fighter units are ordered to defend key bridges along the Rhine. Immediate deployment, no exceptions. Adler exhales sharply. The Rhine, the final barrier before Germany itself. Every pilot in the clearing knows the truth. This is a suicide mission. Bremer folds the letter. Prepare the aircraft, we depart at dusk. Silence. No one protests. What would be the point? Adler steps outside. Snow begins to fall again. Gentle, quiet, almost peaceful. He watches the white flakes drift onto the warped wings of the Bf-109. Once these machines had ruled the skies. Now they can barely take off. Adler's quiet resolve. That evening, as the sun sinks behind the ruined tree line, Adler checks the 109 one last time, tightening bolts, securing wires, praying the engine will hold. Voss approaches, nervously clutching his helmet. Lieutenant, do you think we'll make it? Adler looks at him, young, scared, full of a life that deserves more than to be thrown into the sky to die. He places a hand on the boy's shoulder. Listen to me. Do not die for glory. Do not die for Berlin. If you must die, let it be for the man standing next to you. Voss swallows hard and nods. The squadron gathers, engines sputter to life, one coughs smoke and dies, another barely reaches idle, but they mount up anyway. Because these are orders, because this is duty, because this is the end. As Adler straps into the cockpit, he whispers to himself, just one more flight, one more. Whether he returns, that is a question left to the sky.